fundamental thing for how do we start engineering performance and creating the right systems and infrastructure so that that performance becomes much easier for us to obtain through other people.
Welcome to the Agency Profit Podcast, a show dedicated to going deep space on agency operations, which is just as nerdy as it sounds. I'm your host, Marcel. I'm the CEO of Parakeeto, a firm that helps digital and creative agencies measure and improve their profitability. Join me as I interview some of the smartest thought leaders and agency owners in our space and go deep into operations, metrics, and all the other things you need to get right so you can spend less time worrying about operations and more time executing on your vision. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Agency Profit Podcast. I'm excited today to be joined by a person I met a while back. I don't even remember, James, how we were introduced, but we had a really great conversation. I learned about your incredible background and what you're doing at FG Ventures, which is a holding company that has multiple businesses in the portfolio. And of course, you just launched a great new product helping founders with leadership. You also advise, invest in, and coach other business owners to go from 7 to 8 figures. So with all of that, James, thank you for taking some time to be on the show. I'm excited to have you here.
It's awesome to be here. Thanks for having me, Marcel.
I'm fascinated by your background and how you came to be where you are. So could you maybe in your own words describe what it is that you do today and how you got here?
Yeah, I think I've always been super curious about how things work, and eventually that turned to how do businesses work, right? And all the moving pieces and parts and all the challenges and struggles and things like that. And so today, like you said, I invest in, I work with, I start, run multiple companies. I've been a strategic advisor and consultant for a lot of the really well-known people in the internet marketing space and helping them grow and scale their businesses. Started multiple companies of my own, both on the B2B side and also B2C. We've had, different ventures. So I think there's definitely an element of entrepreneurial ADD that I have, which is why I'm involved in so many different things. But originally I started as a engineering undergrad, aerospace engineering in college, and started in the corporate world. Actually went into software engineering, and then eventually worked for a really big bank doing digital strategy globally for the bank, and then left in about 2011 or so. And a couple of years into that, after I left, I was working as a managing director for a digital analytics firm in New York, and kind of got tired of working with big companies and was interested to see, like, could I work with smaller businesses? Like, was there a market there? Was there anything there? And I actually looked at acquiring businesses as early as 2013. And when I went out and I was working with brokers and all this other stuff, I just found a lot of people who were super passionate about what they were doing, and they were excited about their business, but they were also just trapped in a job. And I was kind of like, well, I don't want to just buy your job, because that doesn't seem like a great idea for me. But I realized that there was an opportunity to help people with their, the way that they structure what they do and how they run their business, so that they could build an asset that produces cash for them and the opportunity for an exit. And so that's really what we focus on now, is helping people create, the growth engine, the operations infrastructure, and ensuring that they have the right product for their market and the right business model, so they could create a great cash flowing asset, and also something that is exitable should they want to do that at some point in the future.
We have a topic that we're going to dig into today, which is around leadership. But before we dig into that, I want to take the opportunity to sort of talk about the first principles, because I think this is one of the things that you become really well attuned to when you're in a position like yours, where you get to be involved in a lot of different businesses, many of which you're not in the weeds day to day. So you see it from, I think, a little bit of a calmer perspective, if you will. You're kind of not in the eye of the storm, and you can kind of observe things, be of it, not in it necessarily. And I think I've experienced that as a consultant looking at a lot of different agencies. You see things so much more clearly than often the people running the business because you've seen it so many times. And especially with you've done this in multiple different sectors, multiple different, verticals. So from that perspective, what would you say are the first principles when it comes to, running a successful business that is actually saleable? What are some of the things that are the simple truths that people overlook?
Man, what a fantastic question. So I guess that means that we have like 3 or 4 days to talk about this.
I wish.
Yeah, I do too. So I think to distill it down, one thing that I think going into my entrepreneurial journey, so to speak, we all have ideas, right? Everybody has ideas. I think this is going to work. I think that's going to work. And, I think it's worth testing ideas. I think ideas need to be tested, but we also have to recognize that our customers are the ones who pay the bills. And if the customer doesn't find extraordinary value in what you're providing, it's probably not the greatest idea. Or it needs to be completely repackaged in a way that conveys the value that you're providing. And so I think that this idea of value being in the eye of the beholder, in the eye of the customer, to paraphrase that, famous quote, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I think that it's the fundamental, one of the fundamentals of business is that, whoever you're selling to has to see value in what you're doing. And, if it's a product that's valuable without, any explanation, great. If it needs some marketing and it needs some messaging and positioning to demonstrate the value, awesome. But your business pretty much is dead on arrival if people don't find value in what you're doing. And I know that, we're talking about first principles, so these things should sound sort of fundamentally true. But a lot of people forget that. A lot of people forget that, and they go on a crusade because they have an idea that they think is awesome. And maybe it's not, and that's okay. And like we shouldn't be shy about cutting our losers, because the only way to get to a winner is to cut the things that are losing and continue to march forward. So I think that's definitely one thing that comes to mind for sure.
Yeah, I see that take on a similar but slightly different shape with a lot of the people that we work with, which tend to be in creative digital agencies, consulting firms. So they're subject matter experts. And at times, I'm sure you've seen this before, the founder sort of, the attention emerges between their values and what's important to them. And in some cases, the relationship they have with their work, they see it as art, they see it as an extension of themselves. And then just the reality of what is actually important to their clients. And sometimes what their clients are asking for that might be in tension with what they think is good. And when you're in that, it can be very emotional and very challenging. But I think it's a similar tension that leads to a similar place of spending a lot of time and energy doing things that are ultimately not valuable to the client or to the customer at the end of the day.
Yeah, seriously. Here's a great example. Like I got an email this morning from QuickBooks. Hey, there's we're changing our pricing again. We're increasing your price. And they couch it in this, we added all these new features that, are going to be amazing. And I'm like, I don't care at all about any of those new features as a customer. I'm happy to just continue getting the product that I've been getting and to pay what I've been paying. I probably don't even want to pay what I've been paying because there's been scope creep and feature creep and all of that stuff anyway. But what happens, especially as a business grows and it starts to scale, you have teams that you're paying to be part of the company. And it doesn't make any sense to say, all right, well, we're going to pay you, but you're not going to develop any new features this quarter, or you're not going to create any new versions of the product. And so what happens is like this, you just kind of start accumulating like all these sea barnacles on the bottom of a ship because the people have to justify their salary. And so now we're paying our people to build things and to do things because we have them, not necessarily because that's what the market or the customers are demanding from us. And it almost becomes a tail wagging the dog where we're just going to add what we think is value and we're going to keep charging you more. And it's just interesting to watch the, life cycles of a company where eventually somebody comes in with a small, nimble, disruptive product that doesn't have any of those features that can charge a nominal fee, and everyone starts migrating to them. And then the big behemoth is like, well, why are our customers leaving? Well, because you've been overcharging them for things that they don't find valuable. And they're going to a smaller new entrant in the market who actually just listened and gave them the three things that they really wanted, which was, in this case, it's just like, I just want clean books and good, accurate financial reporting. I don't need the be all end all. And it's just a really weird, very predictable life cycle that companies will get into. So it's, be warned, I suppose.
So you've touched on a thing that I think is a nice dovetail into the main topic today, which is really around leadership, culture, and people. And I would imagine that, you can correct me if I'm wrong, this is another one of those first principles, at least from my observation, which is every business at its core, if it's going to have enterprise value, is a people business. You need to be able to have other people come in and do the right things and show up with integrity and think critically and do things that are in alignment with the company's vision and values and figure out what's valuable to the customer and all of these things. And that is sort of the bedrock to building a cash flow machine in your business that someone other than you could potentially benefit from and is willing to pay for. And that's a challenge, I think, for a lot of people, especially if they've never been in leadership positions. And a lot of founders have not. They're finding themselves there for the first time as they scale their business, and it becomes a real bottleneck. And so you're doing some great work around this, and you've just released a really interesting product that I think is very cool. So let's dive into that. Let's start with sort of the origin story. How did you come to discover that this was such a problem, one that you wanted to focus on and build products around?
I think selfishly it was a problem for me, and I thought I was just super deficient, and I was, to be honest, in being able to get a team to perform and to achieve the goals that I had. And this actually predates my entrepreneurial career back when I was still in the corporate world. I got promoted to a pretty senior position by the time I was like 29 or 30, and had a really sizable team around the world, multiple countries, multiple business units, all this sort of thing. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to, I just know that there's like people sort of nagging me all the time and asking me questions like, what are we supposed to do about this? And what do we do about this? And so I had a great executive coach, and he kind of helped me work through some stuff. But when I left and I was working in the first consulting firm, it was, again, I was like, well, I feel like I'm just running in quicksand here. Like, why does it feel so hard to get something done when I have people to get something done? And then as I started building and consulting and looking at different companies to acquire, it just started, I just saw it everywhere. I was like, man, nobody seems to really have a great handle on how do I get the most out of my people, right? And I think a lot of times it's not even because they don't have good people. I think it's because there's a failure of leadership in leading those people. And I never intended to like teach people about this. I think I just started talking about it because it was what I was experiencing, what I was going through. And I realized that I needed to overcome my own deficiencies in leading and managing people and getting people organized enough to achieve goals, that I was asking questions, I was talking about it, and realized everybody's got an issue here. And so, yeah, over the years, I've definitely been helping a lot of companies with this. And I think it really started from just trying to figure it out, honestly.
How often do you, when you're assessing a potential investment or acquisition or, a company that you want to get involved in and scale, are people one of the most important, or leadership one of the most important changes that need to be made in your initial valuation?
I think a lot of times, right? And I don't think it's necessarily like we need to fire everybody and start over. I think it's more, we have to put the right structures in place in order to get the best out of those people. I think one of the so I've done more research and learning on this, and probably most people will. And they've done studies that say one of the single biggest factors in getting the most out of people, there's like three main things that it comes down to. One is just an overall failure of leadership, not being able to point people in the right direction and help them know what they're trying to achieve. The next one is a failure of accountability. And the third is a failure of clarity. And a lot of teams are not clear what they're trying to achieve. And even if they are clear, they're not held accountable to the things that they're supposed to be doing to achieve that. And so if you sort of reverse engineer, that's what we don't want. Then how do we get what we do? It becomes, how do we put the right systems and structures in place in order to make sure that we have great accountability, we have great clarity, and we have somebody leading us in a direction that's helping. And so I think most companies, I would say the vast majority of companies could absolutely use strengthening in those three areas. Yeah. Obviously, as a recovering engineer, it's hard for me not to create a framework. But yeah, yes, there's a framework evolving here.
The VAC, I'm hearing VAC, vision, accountability, clarity, as sort of the three key pillars. So yeah, let's talk about them. Where does one start? If someone's listening to this and they think, yeah, shit, I'm probably, the business is underdeveloped in all three of those areas. How do you think about improving that situation, improving the level of leadership?
Yeah. And if you don't mind taking a step back, I would even say, before you say, how do I do it? I think the better first question to ask is, why should you care? Why should you care about doing it? Many entrepreneurs, myself included, are very growth focused, right? We want to focus on either product development or marketing and sales. And we would love to just live in that world. And this idea of, management feels like something that we have to do rather than something that we get to do. It takes us time and it's energy and all that sort of stuff. However, if you look at any business, one of the biggest single line items on your income statement in terms of expense is people, labor cost, right? You're going to have labor costs. You might have advertising costs. If you're in a business that has machinery or whatever, that's going to be somewhere in there too. But by and large, people are going to take up a significant percentage. So every dollar that I make in sales, chances are good I'm spending 25 to 30 cents of that dollar on people somewhere. And most likely, right? These are very rough averages. And so if you say, okay, how am I going to get the best return on my investment on those dollars without making sure that I'm getting my people to perform the way that they need to? You're missing a huge opportunity to drive growth and increase profitability, right? And I don't remember. I'd have to go and look who actually did this study, but somebody found out that across the U.S. alone, businesses waste $500 billion a year on poor team performance. $500 billion a year. I mean, talk about a crazy amount of money, right? And so first, before we get into how do we do it, I think it's important that you recognize the value of why you should do it. And in my mind, if you don't get the best out of your people and you're continuing to pay people to do things, it's like that scene in The Dark Knight with the Joker where he just lights that whole pile of money on fire. And he's like, I just want to watch this money burn, which arguably would be way more exciting to actually watch a pile of money burn than to just continue to silently burn it in the background by not getting great performance out of your team.
Do you want some free resources to help you measure and improve your profitability? If you do, then I want to tell you about our agency profitability toolkit, which you can grab absolutely free in the show notes or by heading to parakeeto.com/toolkit. It's packed with training videos, cheat sheets, templates, and all kinds of other great resources to help you start measuring and improving the essential metrics that are going to drive better profitability in your business. And it's helped thousands of other agencies around the world do the same. So I want to encourage you to go and grab a copy of that. And if you'd rather get in the fast lane and just have our team of experts guide you through the process of measuring and improving your profitability, then I want to encourage you to apply for a consultation at parakeeto.com. And with that, I want to thank you again for tuning in. I hope you enjoy the episode, and I'll let you get back to it. I'm glad you brought this up because it sort of, when I have a guest on that's talking about a subject that's not quite in like the box that our listeners would expect, which is like operations, profitability, finance, those kinds of things, I like to justify that decision. And this right here is the justification for that, right? So if you're listening to this, you run a service-based business, to James's point, probably 50, 60, in some cases, if your profitability is not great, 70% of your AGI is going towards people. And so leadership is your longest lever to improve the value and the profitability of your business. And here's the thing that, I can't repeat enough. I can't tell you the number of clients that we've worked with at Parakeeto. We could show them exactly what's wrong, exactly what metric to move, exactly where it needs to go to in order for them to achieve their goals, exactly what they could do to improve it. Their whole team is aligned. Everybody's clear on what that is. And the missing piece is actually getting those things done, actually taking action, organizing the team, getting everybody on board. It all comes down to people and leadership issues at the end of the day. And it pains me to see clients that have a clear path to getting to where they want to go that struggle to get there because this is the bottleneck. And so I think it's really important. I'm glad we're talking about it. So James, that's why everybody should care. Now the question is, what should they do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the very first thing that you've got to do, which, kind of going back to this idea of fundamentals or first principles, is you have to acknowledge that if you're running a company, you have to take ownership of whatever is happening inside of that business. I'm a big fan of the Jocko Willink extreme ownership philosophy. And I love in that book where he tells a story about Hell Week, and they had 6 teams of SEALs, SEAL recruits, and they were going about this, obstacle course, and they were competing with each other. And one of the teams kept winning, and one of the teams kept losing over and over. And the losing team, every time they lost, they had to go through the entire thing again. So it was, disheartening and physically exhausting and all this sort of stuff. And he talks about them pulling the captain of the losing team aside and saying, "Hey, why is your team losing all the time?" And the captain says, "Well, my team sucks." And they were like, "Oh, really? You think so?" And so they switched the captain from the winning team with the captain of the losing team and just kind of swapped places. And on the next go around, the losing team that now had the captain from the winning team actually won. And to me, there's probably no more demonstrable story about the value of having good leadership. And so the first thing I would say is, like, if your business or your team isn't performing at the level that you want, you could point fingers, but it's really not productive. It's better to just say, I own it, and now I'm going to figure out what I'm going to do about it. And because if you don't own it, there's nothing you could do about it. And so I would just frame everything else that we're about to talk about under, kind of in that context. And I think it's really important that, that we be adults and we be mature about things. And it's like, if you don't like it, you created it, so you get to fix it.
Yeah, those are the spoils of being the boss. As
Yeah.
my good friend Johnny likes to say, everybody wants to be CEO until it's time to do CEO shit.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly right. 100%. But given that backdrop, I'll share a framework that I think has been very, very helpful for me and for a lot of the companies that I've worked with, and it's simple, and I think that's probably why it works. And it's this idea that it starts with this idea of, what does good look like? I think a lot of people have different interpretations of what good looks like. And that becomes really problematic because the more things are subject to interpretation, the more you're going to have slippage, for lack of a better term, in terms of people understanding what they need to do. And so we have to, what we talked about earlier, right? Like, clarity is one of those 3 major components. And to provide clarity, we have to say, well, what does good look like? For example, anytime we're interviewing somebody for a position, one of the key questions that we ask is, what do you think good looks like in this role? Like, if you were to succeed in this role, what would that look like? And it's really fascinating to see that some people have wildly different interpretations of what good looks like, even after having read a job description and what you wrote that says, this is what good looks like in this role. The more you see it, the more you're like, okay, isn't complicated. It's just, we got to do the basic stuff, and we got to do the basic stuff consistently, and we got to just keep doing it. Right. And so painting this picture of what good looks like. And so the framework really is this idea that people can be measured on two axes: willingness and ability. And so if you, as a good consultant would, you have a 2x2 matrix now, right? You have willing and able in the top right-hand corner. You have unwilling and unable in the bottom left-hand corner. And then you've got willing and unable and willing, right? And so what does this look like? Willingness is about, have I bought into your mission? Am I trying to create the same thing as you? Do I have the same vision of the future as you? Do I exhibit or do I adhere to the same values that you have, right? Willingness is about my buy-in to you and your culture and what we're trying to create here together. Ability is, do I have the experience? Do I have the skills? Do I have the knowledge, the training, the expertise, the capability in order to do what's being asked of me? I think that a lot of times when I talk to founders and owners and CEOs, they'll say, oh, this person sucks, or this person is really good. And it's like, okay, cool. But like, what about them sucks? And what about them is really good? And if you dig under the surface just a little bit, you find that invariably they're talking about plotting this person somewhere on this willing and able matrix, right? And if you can do that as a basis for having a performance conversation, it becomes way easier to say, hey, hey, Marcel, I know you're really excited about our vision and you're really happy to be here and you show up every day enthusiastic. And I love that. But at the same time, we're still not hitting these KPIs or these things that you're responsible for. So we need to dig into that, right? Because we've all had people on our teams, if you've been, running your business for any period of time, where you have people who are genuinely excited about what you're doing, but they can't seem to do the job. Or you have people who you're 100% confident have the capability to do the job, but they're like pushing a wet noodle across the floor. And you're like, I can't have either of these things existing. If I want to have a high performing team, I need to have somebody who's absolutely bought in to our mission, our vision, our values, our culture, all of that stuff, and who's absolutely capable of doing the job that we've brought them on for. And so we could go deeper into each of those, kind of things, but that's the fundamental thing for how do we start engineering performance and creating the right systems and infrastructure so that that performance becomes much easier for us to obtain through other people.
Yeah. Okay. So I love the matrix: willingness, ability. Which do they have? Which do they not have? And sort of solving for that is the vision, values, culture for the sort of willingness part. So is that's the buy-in to the big idea. And then you have the ability side of things. So let's quickly start on the vision, values side. What are some of the kind of key mistakes people make, or some of the key principles to getting that right?
I think a big mistake a lot of people make is that they don't do any of that, right? They don't talk about, why do we exist, right? A mission should be, what is our purpose? Like, why are we here, right? Of all of the things that I could be doing with my life, I'm choosing to do this one. Why? Right? And if it's a compelling enough why, the right people who align with that why become bought into it, right? It's the whole Simon Sinek thing that you got right behind you, I think. Start with why. We need purpose, right? human beings want purpose. And so if I come to work and I don't feel like I have purpose, I just feel like I'm doing tasks, and I'm doing tasks just so that my founder, entrepreneur, boss can post another Instagram photo of him on a private jet. Like, that's not a very compelling why, right? Like, I don't think a lot of people are like, oh my God, I can't wait to wake up in the morning so that James can go on a private jet today. Like, maybe I'm wrong, but I think if the why is in service of a need in the world or in service of a problem that customers are facing, then everyone is rallied behind that reason for being and that reason for working together. And I think that becomes far more compelling. Additionally, the why is important, but the what are we creating is also important, right? Why are we creating something and what are we creating are very, very important things to get right. And I don't think it has to be complicated. I feel like this idea of mission, vision, values is sort of corporate speak, which I hate. But why are we doing what we're doing? What are we trying to create? And what's important to us in terms of values? Those are common sense, very everyday language terms that I think we'd be better off using.
There's a little, there's something that I'm gathering from this that I think is an important nuance, because I've found that when faced with this question or when asking this question to other entrepreneurs, a lot of times the frame is, well, what do I want as a founder? What's my vision? What are my goals, et cetera? And invariably, like, a lot of that has to do with, like, I want to make more money, get bigger, have more profit, et cetera, which is all fine and good. And that's the honest truth for a lot of people. And there's nothing wrong with that. However, I think the nuance of what you're saying here ties back to one of the first things that you said in this episode, which is it's about creating value. And the thinking here is, okay, as a founder, you want to make a whole bunch of money. The path to that is creating a shitload of value. And then your business is theoretically a vehicle for creating that value and capturing some of it as profit. And so it's like, go to that, build the company vision, mission, values around that. Like, what is the problem we solve? How do we think about solving it? Why does that matter? Why is it important? Get that right. And the byproduct should be a business that helps you achieve your financial goals. And that reframe, I think, is very useful for me in terms of, like, how do I create a mental frame for this thinking exercise that is tethered to, like, the important thing?
Yeah, I very much agree with that. I think that it's, at the end of the day, the best businesses in the world are not about you. They're about the customer and the problem that you're solving and the value that you create in solving that problem. And if you fall in love with solving a problem for a customer and you can do it at a cost-effective rate, then you can make a good amount of money in the process.
That's it. That's a first principle right there. So let's assume that we do have this stuff in place. We have that clear vision, mission, values that's well articulated. The team is bought in. We have a great culture around that, but we're still struggling to get the outcomes. We're still struggling to get the results. What should we be thinking about on that side of the equation?
Yeah. So for me, on the ability side, which is what we're talking about now, we basically create a one sheet scorecard for every person on the team. I think it's also important to address this point. When you're architecting a team, it should be what are the goals of the business that you're trying to achieve? What roles do you need to achieve those goals? And then what people fill those roles. What I see happen a lot of times is that people have people that they like, or they have people that are convenient or nearby or in proximity or whatever. And they're like, okay, well, what are we going to do with Tom? And you're like, well, this isn't about Tom. This isn't about any individual in particular. This is about what roles do we need on this team in order to achieve our goal. Right. And I'm a big baseball guy. So an analogy here for me is a baseball team has very specific roles on that team. And then they go and look for players to occupy those roles. Right. It would make zero sense to have a team full of first basemen and then say, all right, well, you're a first baseman, so we don't have another first base role. We're just going to put you in the outfield. And that's what a lot of entrepreneurs will do. They're like, hey, like you look good, like you go over here. And so I think when we're talking about these scorecards, I'm talking about a scorecard for a role, and that role is necessary in order for us to achieve the goals that we have for the business, right? So a great, illustration of this might be, all right, well, we have roles for marketing and getting attention. We have roles for sales and converting that attention into dollars. We have delivery or fulfillment roles. We have ops roles. We have finance roles. And then, they could have a whole variety of different flavors underneath those 5 categories. But first we want to be able to do that. And then within each scorecard, I'm looking at 4 different things. One is what I call their big 5 objectives. This is the why are they here? Why is this role necessary? Right? Why is this role necessary? On a baseball team, the role is a pitcher. The pitcher is necessary because we have to throw the ball to a batter. If we don't have a pitcher, we can't do that, right? And so why is this role necessary is number 1. And so it would basically be, am I on purpose with the things that I'm focusing on with these objectives? That's the first quadrant that I call the big 5 objectives. And then the next thing is more detailed, but no less important. And that's what I call critical success factors. What are the things that I'm doing on a regular basis that will be manifestations of me achieving that purpose that I'm working towards, right? So if it's a sales role and my one of my objectives is to continue to bring in new sales for the company, one of my critical success factors is going to be I'm having calls every day with leads, or I'm following up with leads, or like whatever that critical thing happens to be. And the third quadrant is, what are the metrics that we're using to say, are we actually accomplishing the things that we say we're here to do? And the things that we're doing on a regular basis, are they materializing and creating the results that we want? And there's nobody who's going to disagree with, oh, we shouldn't have KPIs. Nobody's going to say we shouldn't have KPIs in a business. However, if you actually go and look at what people are measuring in their business, they're not really as committed to measuring as they would say. There's a lot of lip service around KPIs and measurement. And so that's the third thing. And then the fourth thing is reporting. So this role, how are we going to keep track of whether they're doing the things and they're hitting their metrics? Is there a weekly report that they need to fill out? Is there a dashboard that gets produced? Is there something that happens daily? Is there something that happens weekly or quarterly or monthly or whatever? And so for me, when we're framing out a scorecard for a role, it has those 4 pieces, and those are the building blocks to provide that clarity to people, as well as to set the stage and the structure for the accountability that's necessary in order to make sure everybody's focused on the right things.
It's beautiful, James. Beautiful in its simplicity and elegance, but these are all the same first principles that, I've heard in different flavors from everywhere that I've looked for advice on how to actually hold people accountable to the result. You've touched on all of those things. And I love the idea of having this all on one page. And you've inspired me to go and look at our sort of quarterly performance review document and make some adjustments to it based on what you've talked about here. So with all of that, knowing that we're getting to time here, you've developed a new product that I think is really cool that I would love for you to share with the audience that's related to this idea of the roles in the business, the hats that people wear, and some of the challenges around leadership. So what is this 57 hats product that you've recently launched?
Yeah, thanks. We're pretty pumped about it. So I don't know if anyone's watching, like you can see, I'm holding up the box here. It's so we basically took one of the core frameworks that I have, which is helping helping founders in particular. This is where it started, helping founders take hats off, because we accumulate a lot of things as we grow a business, right? First, you're the product developer, and then you're the product developer and the salesperson. Then you're product developer, salesperson, customer service, and maybe you're doing a little bookkeeping. And then, and eventually you got like all these different things that are going on, and they're preventing you from actually focusing on the growth stuff that you need to focus on. And so our philosophy is We need to figure out how to help you take some hats off so that you can focus on the things that you enjoy, that you're good at, and that really drive the business forward. And so what we did was we took this framework and gamified it into a physical product. And so there's a game board in here, two-sided game board. There's cards, and it literally walks you through a process so that by the end of it, you're holding a little stack of cards, and you're like, okay, these are the people that I need to bring onto the team. These are the things that I need to delegate to people that are already on the team. And these are things that I'm going to have to worry about in the future. But it's a very systematic, self-service, gamified experience. And we're getting a ton of positive feedback. So we're really proud of it.
Well, I am a big fan of these kinds of exercises, and I love that you made it tactile. I love that it's something that you can touch and feel and use as an exercise, with at a team retreat or a leadership retreat, or use with a co-founder or a coach. So I would love for everyone to be able to go check it out. Where should we send them in the show notes if they want to have a look at what you're doing with?
Yeah, it's 57hats.com, just the number 57hats.com. And we're still running a good, a cool offer. I don't know how long we keep doing it. But it's right now it's still free plus shipping, just to get the box. And, we just crossed the cool milestone. We just sold our first 1,000 units. We just launched recently, and, pretty pumped about it.
It's exciting. I can't wait to get mine. And play around with it and go through this exercise myself. I think it'll be very enlightening. And with that, James, for those that like the cut of your jib, as they say, and they want to follow you online, consume the content that you create, where should we send them in the show notes?
Yeah, jamespfriel.com is my website, and that's probably the best place to go.
Awesome. So we'll have links to James's website and some social profiles in the show notes, as well as a link to go check out the 57 Hats product. With that, James, I want to thank you for making the time to be on the show. Always a pleasure to chat with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Marcel. I appreciate the conversation.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you've ever found yourself thinking, man, I get so much value from this podcast, I wish there was something I could do to return the favor. Well, today's your lucky day, because you can leave us a review wherever you're listening to this, and it is incredibly helpful. Of course, if you haven't grabbed a free copy of the Agency Profit Toolkit, go and get that. It's got tons of free resources to help you improve your profitability. If you're looking to get in the fast lane and get help from experts to improve your profitability and measure your most important metrics, then apply for a consultation at Parakeeto.com. We'd love to chat with you and figure out how we can help. With all of that, thank you so much for being a listener, and we will see you on the next episode.